conversation you're about to watch is between myself and Dr. Madhava Setty. It's a bit of a recap of an event he attended called the World Vaccine Congress, which is a major vaccine event put on by Big Pharma. He went there sort of undercover, if you will, just kind of like there to have conversation with people who disagree with him. However, he didn't, necessarily come across and say, hey, look, I'm in the vaccine cautionary space. He more so came across and said, hey, you know what, I'm talking to you as a physician that, whose patients have questions, so to speak, right? So this gave him an opportunity to sort of get on the same page with industry leaders and industry people in the event so that he could kind of hear what they had to say about some tough questions that he did pose. So stay tuned. There are a number of important key takeaways here. I know this conversation is a little longer than what we normally put out. However, I think what we do talk about here and some of the stuff that we land on is crucial for our current time. So enjoy the conversation. So Madhava, I know you are currently attending the World Vaccine Congress in Washington, D.C., and some of our offline chit-chats were revealing, some interesting things about the folks that are showing up there and some of the perspectives on, the COVID vaccines from inside the industry. And I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to sort of debrief what it's been like for you to be on the inside of this sort of big pharma vaccine event, and see what the perspectives are like. Can you first kind of lay out a little bit more, like what is this event or Congress actually about?
Well, it's a very large event. It's happening, as you said, in Washington, D.C., at a very large convention center. And the organization is called the World Vaccine Congress. And it is being attended primarily by the industry, by the vaccine industry. And there are a number of people in academics and public policy who are in attendance. And I believe, it's actually interesting to find out, that's actually why I'm here, is to figure out why they're getting together, what they're trying to do, and to get an insight as to what they're thinking. And it's been very eye-opening.
Right.
First of all, it's really good to be in the middle of all of these people who disagree with me. And that's something that we really ought to try to do more often, to figure out how do you engage with people who are completely see things differently. So that's what it is. And to answer your question, I'm not exactly sure what this is about, but it is well funded. This conference center, probably costs several $100,000 a day to rent out. The exhibitions, the exhibits, I'm sorry, not the exhibit. The exhibits are really, really sophisticated from the vaccine industry. And, it's not just about Pfizer and Moderna. There are all of these little industries that are profiting and selling products to people who do vaccine trials. Everything from, how do we recruit patients, like organizations that recruit patients for trials, to people who make devices like needleless administration devices for vaccines, and and all of that stuff in between. But primarily, I'm there for the discussions between the scientists and the vaccine manufacturers.
Yeah. So this is, people from all around the world that are very much invested and interested in the vaccine industry, kind of meeting to discuss all things advancements and perhaps even, what went right during COVID from their perspective. I'm assuming that's, a big part of the discussion. Before we kind of get into some of the specifics of what you've heard and some of the questions you've asked and some of the conversations you've had, why don't you just kind of lay out at this moment in time what your sort of perspective or position is with COVID vaccines? Because I'm sure that was, probably the area in which you've had the most questions.
Well, I think your audience knows where I stand on this. I don't believe there's enough evidence out there to demonstrate safety or efficacy, and we've known that all along. And it's been a matter of how do you tell the public to look a little harder. And so I enter as a vaccine skeptic, which is completely different than most of the people there. So my general impression, and this may not be so popular amongst our sphere, if you will, is I am overwhelmed by the evidence that these people think that they're doing the right thing. I mean, they really, really do believe that these products are safe and effective and are the best thing that we've ever done. And they believe that they have successfully ended the pandemic. That's what they believe.
This is the people at the event, at the Congress,
Mm-hmm.
Industry leaders, policymakers. These are people that they fully believe. That's what you're saying.
That's what they believe, and
Yeah.
they believe, and they're sort of dumbfounded by the anti-vax movement.
Mm-hmm.
And one of their, as spelled out in our very first plenary meeting with all 3,100 people sitting together, it was laid out that one of the biggest challenges they have right now is vaccine hesitancy, and
Right.
what can we do differently? And and it made it very easy for me to take a position here, like how do I engage them around that issue. And my personal, like when I speak up in these panel meetings or ask questions, I always am saying, look, if we're truly interested in getting rid of vaccine hesitancy, we need to bring the experts who disagree with us being, they think that I'm with them, but I want to know if you really want to diffuse the anti-vax vaccine cautionary sphere, bring in their spokespeople. Why not
Yeah.
talk to them and dismantle their position in front of the public? So that's been my into this,
Right.
and it's been a very educational couple of days to see how it's being received.
Yeah. How, like, when you're there, like, just to kind of give a sense, paint a picture, like how do you know that they fully believe that they're doing the right thing? What are they? Is it what they're saying? Is it the emotion? Is it the sense that comes across?
Well, the tone was set in the very first meeting, and it was being chaired by Greg Poland. And your audience may know who this person is. This is the, I believe, the chair of vaccine research at the Mayo Clinic. And he came into our, viewfinder 2 years ago because he suffered tinnitus,
Yeah.
like moderately severe tinnitus after getting the first of the series of COVID mRNA vaccines. And he was openly announcing that this happened to him, and he brought together a couple of scientists. I'm not sure if we covered this on the Pulse or on Collective Evolution, but he did a reasonable job to ask the experts what they thought. And in my recollection, he admitted that this is a problem, and we don't know how big it is. So this is the person that is chairing this entire Congress, this symposium. And to answer your question, right away, the comments from him were about how devastatingly dangerous people like Andrew Wakefield are.
Interesting.
Yeah, and making comments like, maybe we ought to start a rumor that that graphene oxide is in ivermectin. Maybe that would help us. And it was met with applause and laughter by the audience. So I knew where we were standing here with this conversation and who the audience was.
And you were afraid to get found out, I guess, eh?
Well,
I recognize that guy. Someone.
I don't think I'm a big enough person, to be recognized. And here's what's interesting is that those people never look at our side, right? So
Yeah.
I would be shocked.
Well,
If
let me push back on that for a second, because if Poland, for example, made the graphene oxide joke and all of them knew that, are you suggesting that they kind of just everybody in the audience kind of is aware loosely of these conspiracy theories around graphene oxide? Like you're saying, they probably haven't taken the time to actually look deeply into some of these videos, articles, or whatever it might be. Not that I think graphene oxide has the best evidence by any means, but
Right.
anything really in the cautionary sphere.
Yeah, that's how they're qualifying our position, is that we are the people who believe that there are chips in every single injectant,
Yeah.
as opposed to the publicly available data paints a different picture, and
Right.
the trial data themselves demonstrate that there was malfeasance, and we have conflicting evidence coming from different parts of the world. There's a huge uncertainty here that's not being acknowledged. That's not what they know of us. They believe that the anti-vax position is completely unfounded, and its basis are on these kinds of extreme positions, which is interesting, right? Because, this is where, you and I have spoken offline about this, is that kind of position, that, these extreme positions don't help us.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I don't know, but if you go with that first, that it's a demonstration of how that is great material for their side to say, oh, we're just, we don't even know what we're talking about, because we believe that as soon as you get you're going to be stuck to the refrigerator because of you're now magnetized. That's what they think the anti-vax position is all about.
Yeah. I'm assuming these are the kinds of things they've been saying there and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it comes up, tongue in cheek, like, that's what we're up against, folks. Why can't we get to them? That's who they believe. That's what they believe. And so that's where that's their impression of the vaccine cautionary sphere.
Right. So they'll bring up little bits here and there during their presentations, calling out the hesitancy being the largest issue, primarily because of a group of people out there that are spreading bogus information. And in any way during the presentations or the panel discussions, all these different things, have they sort of addressed any of the questions around some of the data, some of the adverse events, this kind of stuff? Does that come up in conversation at all?
Well, it does, and there are a subset of smaller group sessions that have to do with vaccine safety, and I'm trying to make my way around and try to go to all these different things to see what they have to say about vaccine safety. But I'm most interested, honestly, in their approach to extinguishing vaccine hesitancy. Like, what do they think the best way is? And what I have come forward with in these meetings, when questions are taken from the audience, is that I say, my perspective on this is like, look, those people who are on the fence about this, that we have gotten to vaccinate by giving them Krispy Kreme donuts and taking away their privileges to travel, they're all vaccinated now. The ones where it worked have complied. And if you're truly interested in getting to the other group of people who continue to resist this, we have to use a different approach. I'm trying to speak from their position so that they can engage with me. And what I say to them is, look, it's not working. So I think what we should do is bring on the expert physician with peer-reviewed published data who is vaccine cautionary, because this is the spokesperson for that movement. That small group of people that they think doesn't want to get vaccinated, they believe people like, Pierre Corey or Meryl Nass or, these other people, Paul Merrick, the people that our sphere knows all about, and bring them onto your show, like NBC. By the way, spokespeople from NBC, the Washington Post, and Scientific American, these journalists were also there answering questions. Bring them on your show and then dismantle their argument. Isn't that the best way, honestly, to really drive it home that the anti-vax position is unfounded? And here's what's interesting. Is that every time that I'm pretty much asking the same question in different groups to see how people are responding to it. And every single time, the person sitting next to me or behind me will say, that's a really good question. Why don't we do that? I don't understand why we're not doing that. And I've been approached by people outside the meeting who come up to me, like, these are vaccine manufacturing people who say, yeah, that's a really good point you're making. And I don't know why we're not doing that. And I say, I know. And each time, the panels that I've addressed this to, there is a specific person there who is from Australia who just flatly says that would be a mistake, because once you grant them equal footing with us, it's a very dangerous thing, because that's how the public will be misled when they think that the anti-vax position, whatever, vaccine cautionary position is valid. So it's a mistake. Right. And this, I never get the chance to ask the follow-up question, which is, well, how's it working for you? Right?
Yes.
It's not,
exactly.
if you want to get this extra group, well, this is the way to do it. Everything else has
Yeah,
failed, right? Let's try it.
yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean this is akin to the way the mainstream media will often talk about dissenting voices that are in the cautionary space. They'll always introduce them as a some sort of pejorative along with their credentials, right? So they'll always try and like downgrade their credentials so as to not suggest that this is an expert opinion, and that's kind of the same thing I think we're hearing. Actually, I just got a notification from my phone of breaking news. The police in DC are looking for a potential mole at the vaccine congress. I think you should watch out. I think they found you out.
I wouldn't be surprised if no, I don't want to go that far. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're in
But
cahoots. Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, getting back to the goods here,
Yeah,
I think that's often what they're trying to do is not allow. So it makes sense. What I'm saying is her position, her response makes sense to even what happens, on the mainstream side of things. So you've asked that question. You get the same response each time. Have there been any other questions you've brought forth, or are you just kind of focusing on that one?
I'm focusing on this one because my intent here is to really find out what they think, and to give our side a chance.
Right.
And what I found out is absolutely astonishing, because no one there. First of all, I don't know how many like practicing physicians are in attendance. The vast majority of people work for pharma or biotech,
Yeah.
or they work for academia.
Right.
And people coming in, from community clinics, they're not there. So what we're finding here is that it's an echo chamber, right? And
Yeah.
you and I have been talking about this a lot. You talk about it a lot. Like, we're in an echo chamber. We need to remember that we're just hearing voices that agree with us,
Yeah.
and keep pushing us to more extreme positions that may or may not be true, but the certainty is what is a detractor from clarity. And they're in the same position. They actually, like, for example, today I spoke with, I posed the same question in a panel, and one of the panelists was an epidemiologist from Johns Hopkins, who was very interested in my question, because then she engaged me after the panel session to say, that was a really good question you asked. And, I think it's important to, educate our primary care providers. And then I started, trying to probe, like, how much she knew about the studies. And
Yeah.
I said, so, look, and I sort of phrase it like this. It's like, my, the people in my community are coming to me and saying, uh, why should I get the vaccine? Because the trial shows that more people died if you got the vaccine from all causes than if you got the placebo.
Yeah.
That's in layperson's terms of saying all cause mortality is higher in the therapy group. There's never been a therapy that I know that gets approved or authorized where more people die if you get it. Like, forget about like COVID or non-COVID. More people died, period. 15 to 14, or 21 to 17, depends on where in the trial you're looking, but more people died. And she looked at me like, and she said, what, is that a new study? What do you mean? And I said, no, this is the 6-month Pfizer trial data published in the New England Journal. And she's like, oh, I didn't know that.
Right.
And then I asked her, and then they say, look, the vaccine has been shown to have negative efficacy in England. Like, seriously negative efficacy if you wait long enough. There's no explanation for that. I can understand that it wanes, but you understand that you're more apt to get COVID-19 if you've been vaccinated? And she's never heard of that. She's never
Yeah.
heard of the study, or the public data that's being put out there by the United Kingdom's Health Surveillance Agency.
Now, just
And
a
go
clarifying
ahead.
question on that, though. She says she's never heard of it, but does she give the impression that she's heard the opposite, that these folks are generally doing better than all the unvaccinated? Like,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying?
Well, they're all willing to admit that the products do not prevent infection, or for
Yeah.
very long.
Yeah.
They understand that, and of course they're moving towards, well, we know for a fact that it keeps you out of the hospital, and keeps you alive, more than if you not completely, but there's a mortality benefit. That's their position. But here's what's really fascinating is in the first meeting where I brought this question up, I happened to be sitting next to the director of the UK HSA, the United Kingdom Health Surveillance Agency.
Yeah.
And I'm referring to probably what was the most stunning piece of public data that became available in September of 2021, where they demonstrated that in some age groups, you're more apt to get sick if you've been vaccinated, like significantly more. And it wasn't just a blurb or a blip in the data. Subsequent data sets from that agency demonstrated a growing risk as months went by if you got the primary series compared to being unvaccinated. And I'm sitting next to her, and I said, so, like, what do you think about that, right? And she just blew it off like, well, I'm not aware of that. This is the director of the UK HSA.
Right.
And then I said, well, what about the ONS data? The ONS data is the Office of National Statistics. You and I did a video on that a few months ago, where it demonstrates that, look, all-cause mortality changes after you've been vaccinated, like for the worse. Why is that? And her response was, well, the ONS people aren't researchers. They don't know what they're doing. We have to like correct them when they do this stuff.
Right.
And and my point was, like, they're not supposed to interpret the data. They're just supposed to tell us what the numbers are, right?
Right.
And she blew that off. And then I asked her about Tess Lawrie, who is an intrepid researcher, like highly credentialed critic of the vaccines. She wrote an open letter to the MHA, which is the equivalent of the FDA in England, in the spring of 2021, saying we need to halt this until we know more. And she blew Tess off too. And you know what her response was? She's like, well, a lot of these physicians and scientists are getting a lot of fame for coming out with this position. For example, there's a cardiologist in my country that is really taking us to task and in making a statement because he wants to gain fame. Mm-hmm. And I said, do you mean Asim Malhotra? And she said, yeah, oh, you know who that is? I'm like, yeah, you should know who that is. This is someone who had fame before COVID, yeah, right? I mean, that's exactly who you'd go to.
He's a world-renowned cardiologist.
Yeah, it's like, so
it's interesting. It's like mental gymnastics to avoid addressing the data and avoid addressing what's there. In no way do they address the data at all. It's just sort of character attacks and brush offs.
I don't think they've seen all of the data.
Right.
That's what it is. And there's some brushing off because I'm asking them very direct questions, which they brush off because they don't have a response. Either they have to admit that they don't know, or that they don't have a good response. And
out of curiosity, what's the body language like when you're asking these questions? Are they noticeably kind of nervous, or do they feel pretty confident in what they're saying? Like, what's your sense of that?
I should have been paying more attention. I was paying more attention to being careful with how I brought these things up, just to be able to engage them.
Yeah.
The epidemiologist from Johns Hopkins, I think, was visibly stunned when I offered, like, this is trial data. This is something you should know. And I even asked, but the chief of UK HSA was totally cool. He just moved on. I feel like she's a professional when it comes to this stuff. Very confident in her position, and maybe is used to this kind of cross-examination.
Yeah. So the sort of, I guess, the general sense of this is what it sounds like. That a lot of people in attendance that at least you spoke to, that you heard speak on panels, probably get their information from whatever mainstream source. They haven't really looked at the data in terms of the cautionary space, the vaccine cautionary space. So how then are these people taking their positions? Do you, like, as industry professionals, do you think they are getting training? Hey, here's what you're supposed to say. Is it, hey, I just follow whatever the government policy says? Like, where are they coming to their conclusions? Is it just general news watching?
Well, I think the vast majority of people in attendance don't need to look at the data. They just have to go there and do their job and, build their products.
Yeah.
The people who should know what the data shows, or at least know where the uncertainty in their position lies, don't know. They don't
Right.
read anything. I actually think that, for example, this Johns Hopkins epidemiologist, she's not reading studies. She's just saying, well, we know they're safe and effective. Let's be clear. We all know that, right?
Right.
And I would suggest that she gets her information from CNN. Just like, Rochelle Walensky admitted when she first found out. I think she was asked, like, where do you get your information from? And she said CNN or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I don't think that these people are actually going to look anywhere. And
yeah, the idea is, when I talk to friends and family about stuff like this, sometimes I often say, I think you'd be surprised the amount of, what you call professionals, politicians, so on and so forth, the amount of them that haven't actually looked at something, to the depths that you think they are. You believe there's this credential, there's this, that, whatever. But, the average journalist who decides to actually deep dive into this probably knows more about it than these people that are on the television set, kind of telling you. And a lot of people can't really believe that, right? They have a hard time believing that, this Johns Hopkins epidemiologist, for example, would not have looked and sat there and read all the studies. And yet these cautionary folks can list off, 50, 60 studies that are worth reading. And, those people are brushed off. So, it definitely is an interesting moment that we find ourselves in. How many more days are you still there for?
just another day.
Another day. And what's the events of tomorrow? What can we expect our mold to to get here?
I don't know. I don't think it's much more than what I've done. First of all, there's too many presentations happening simultaneously, so I can't attend everything. I'm only attending a tiny percentage of them. But, my interest really is where this is going and, like, what we're up against. And we're up against a juggernaut of, like, there's nobody driving the bus. These people, it's sort of collective unconsciousness. Collective devolution, if you will. It's really like groupthink, and it's so prevalent that they can't even imagine that they're wrong. Mm-hmm. Like really, it's like, how could we be wrong? And it's worthy of sort of contemplation because part of the reason that I think they're so certain is that they've got all this money. I mean, this is like a huge event. How could we be wrong if the world is rewarding us with this kind of affluence? We must be right.
Yeah.
And, and I don't want this point to be lost here because this is a big takeaway is that, look, we have to understand that they think they're doing the right thing. They really, really do. I've always been critical of people who, say any doctor that injects kids with this product is akin to a Dr. Mengele, Nazi Germany physician who experimented. No, they think they're doing the right thing because they're being told that's what's going on. And just like the people here, they haven't looked at the studies. They haven't actually looked. So their intention is actually really, I mean, of course they want to make a ton of money, but they don't think they're hurting anybody. They're actually sort of shocked that people aren't accepting how amazing their products are because they think it's clear.
Yeah. And, out of curiosity, you mentioned briefly that the Australian lady there, I forget her name, or if you even offered her name, but Katie something.
Katie Atkinson, I think, yeah.
Katie Atkinson. So, she said essentially we can't platform these people on the same level of us. That could be disastrous. But has there been any discussion or talk or potentially signaling of support for censorship and for removing these types of voices from public dialogue?
No.
No.
That's about as close as they came, which is her voicing it. And I'm very, very curious about who she is. She made, I think it was her, but somebody in this panel where she sat talked about how dangerous the anti-vax position is because they, in 2021 there was $4 million being donated to that movement, and now it's up to 20. And that's a threat, right? It's like, I think you make that much in about a day, but but I looked at her page. I think she's a professor from Western Australia, and she herself, she has at least $2 million in grants designed around how to get rid of vaccine hesitancy. That's her thing.
Yeah.
So,
doesn't really have a financial interest in.
I'm sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
She just doesn't have a financial interest in necessarily being, balanced here.
Yeah, I think there's something to her. Far be it from me to know exactly what her intentions are, but my guess is that she's got some skin in the game here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, interesting insights from inside, the vaccine. I guess it's the vaccine industry, really, and I mean, I'm not surprised that a lot of these people believe they're really doing the right thing because, I think it's a lot to change your mind about something, and it's a lot when your career, when your inventions, when your all these sorts of things might be associated with it. And I know we're kind of talking about the COVID vaccine here more than other vaccines, and that's a whole other can of worms to open up. But it almost feels like it's an industry that's sort of under attack, and it is, and I think for good reason, because there's been many good reasons to attack the industry. And I think instead of just being open to discussing, it's closing in more, and the more I think it closes in, the more it reveals sort of its true colors and actually wakes more people up. So, I guess my question is, and maybe this is a bit of a summarizing question from you, is from what you're hearing about some of their tactics on addressing vaccine hesitancy, do you think it'll be successful or just potentially get people to question things even more?
The latter. That's what I keep saying. It's like you've converted everyone you can convert with the carrot and stick. The people you're after right now, they don't buy that anymore.
Yeah.
It's interesting because one of the things that was brought up in the very first meeting was the fact that, well, we have a problem here because only 15% of people have taken the bivalent booster, and that means that we have to do better with our messaging. And the obvious question is, like, why do you need better messaging? Right? I mean, they're not taking it because they know it's not working. Yeah. And that there's no threat, right? I mean, like, if you actually made a product that was protective and safe, you wouldn't need messaging.
Yeah.
There would be, huge uptake. I mean, like that simple possibility does not cross their mind.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they're, and again, not trying to make this super us versus them, but I mean, it's naturally, the nature of the situation. But I believe, their critiques to the anti-vax side would just be, they refuse to look at the truth. They're caught up in an echo chamber. They're, all their decisions are emotional, and they're only following fake news, right? But yet it's very easy to make the argument, against them as well, except that would be lost,
Well, that's exactly how I brought it up. The first time I brought it up, I was like, look, let's step away from the data and talk to someone who doesn't know how to dissect data. Like, they don't know. They're not going to believe, they just don't know. To them, we're mirror images of each other. Like, our side believes the other side has been duped. They're listening to misinformation, and because of it, they're a danger to us.
Yeah.
That's exactly what both sides look like. Exactly. Yeah. Right? You don't know what the data is, but that's how they see it. The difference is one side is clamoring, just pleading for a debate. Can we just openly talk about it? And the other side is saying, "Oh, no, we can't do that. That's too dangerous." how do you think they're going to respond? Do you think they're really going to go with the like, oh, we got to go with the person who closes the book on any discussion? I mean,
Yeah,
like, isn't it obvious that that's the problem? If you want to get those people, you have to open up a discussion, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
the way in, I think. Um,
absolutely. And when there's no debate and all it is forcing it down people's throats and then throwing out incentives, that doesn't help either, right? People are not dumb, as much as that's the sentiment from that
right.
crowd.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, we don't want to say anyone is dumb, but honestly, the people who have been holding out are the ones that I believe have really looked deeply at what's going on here and
yeah,
not just went along because it was convenient. But I can't stress it this point more is that I've heard from several people with microphones in their hands who are standing up on podiums saying, there's no point in discussing this with a screaming anti-vaxxer.
hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
We have to stop screaming, honestly. If
yeah,
you can do whatever you want to. I'm not telling people shut up. I'm just saying
yeah,
notice that it's not easy to engage someone who is screaming from a position of certainty
yeah,
that they're right and you're wrong. And
yeah,
regardless of what the data shows, why would they want to engage someone who is screaming?
yeah,
And th- we have to have more voices that are like, okay, look, can we have a conversation, please? Please, can we
yeah,
just talk about it? We
yeah.
understand
It's
that you think you're doing the right thing. We understand that, but let's just talk about the data. Can we just do that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what's key about, taking responsibility, right? If you're on the side or if you believe that you're seeing something that's worthy of questioning, be responsible enough to say, I'm going to take responsibility for the way those people to some extent perceive me. If I can come in a respectful, engaged manner where I'm not, calling people names and this, that, whatever, then I've really given them no reason to attack me. So then that's
Mhm.
on them, right? But
Right.
when people are losing their minds and swearing at people and wanting to hang people in the streets, hey, I get it. There's anger there, and there's rage there, and perhaps rightfully so. But I don't think we're going to get very far by maintaining that,
Agreed.
as our
Right. I
approach.
mean, look, here's the thing is that you don't have to forgive them, but just engage with them in a productive way.
Yeah, yeah,
If you're
exactly.
really interested in changing what's happening on our planet, it behooves us to have the presence of mind to engage with them respectfully. And I hope that our viewers out there will just simply like believe me that they think they're doing the right thing. They
Yeah.
don't think that they're out to harm us and they're getting away with it. These people actually don't know what they're doing,
Hmm.
and someone a long time ago uh, said something,
I know
you
where
know,
this is going. They know
forgive
not what they
them.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah, he had long hair, I think, right? But I mean, what did he really look like? Well, hey, we don't even know.
I don't know, but
Yeah,
those are actually very timeless words, and
yeah,
you know, we're being we have to rise above them, and rising above often means opening your heart more than they do.
yeah,
And look, I've got a lot in this, a lot invested, and I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to talk to them because I seriously believe that we're on the right side here, and it's just a matter of getting people to engage with us.
yeah. That's it. That's all well said. Thanks for doing what you're doing, going out there and being the mole, risk getting caught. No, just kidding. But I think it's an important role to play, and I'm curious to hear how tomorrow goes, and yeah, we'll see. I guess how she goes as time goes on here.
Yeah, I'll report back if I find anything new. Thanks for
Cool.
having me on, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.